Coming today to today's SALT Lunch and Learn. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about how to utilize your IEPs and ISPs. Some of you are right now, most of you are probably in the IEP stage, and very much like me, I was into the IEP and I knew the ETR and some of these things, but then when my son graduated, suddenly I got, we're going to have a meet and talk about ISPs. I'm like, I didn't know there was an ISP. So I wanted to make sure we talked about the IEPs, and just let you know there is an ISP following the IEP when your son or daughter graduates, and then just how opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities also can tie into this whole process and utilizing these plans. So for those who don't know who I am, my name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Trainer Coordinator for the SALT Talks. And I just want to also, this whole month we're talking about transition and transition planning. So like last week we talked about transition as well, how the county board works with you and stuff with the transition process, the eligibility and all that stuff. We did get into some of that last Tuesday night. Next week we're going to be talking to Project Life and Project Search. If you don't know what Project Life is, Project Search is, and your child's especially in high school, you'll want to join and hear what those programs are. And then on the 26th, we're going to be talking about employment post-secondary, and then what happens if the option you choose, whether employment or post-secondary, what happens if it doesn't work? What do you do? So we're going to be talking about that at the end of the month. And then also one more thing before we get started, at the end, when this is all over, in your browser will pop up a survey. Butler County is running a survey, and we are putting the information out there. The question is, how does a caregiver, what do they do for self-care? So that's the question. If you're a caregiver or someone who takes care of someone, you can answer that. What is your self-care? How do you take care of yourself? What do you do for yourself? And that's the question's going to come up. They're just taking a survey for a short time. So anyway, I am going to turn it over to Mary Hils. She is with the Butler County Board of Developmental Disability, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself. But I did want to say, if you're not from Butler County, that is fine. Most of the baseline information is pretty well basic throughout the counties. Just take what you learned today and you take it back to your SSA or your county board. Just take your notes and then just ask the questions at your location, or we can get you in touch with whatever county you're in, and that county board or OOD, whoever's in for the opportunities in Ohio. Like if you're in Montgomery County or another county, Sarah can help you with that connection as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, and I'll pull up, while you introduce yourself, I'll pull up your presentation, okay?
Yes. Okay, well, thanks for everybody coming today. I am a transition SSA. I'm also the lead in the transition department, so that just means that I train new SSAs. A little background, I did work in schools for about 15 years as an OTA, an occupational therapy assistant. So I have that background. I was working on, IEP goals with the assistance of the OT. And then I became an SSA for Butler County DD. And when I first started about 8 years ago, I had children on my caseload up to 14. And then right when COVID hit, I jumped into the adult world for a couple of years. And then I came back, I came into the transition world. So now I think I have all the pieces of the SSA, little pieces, because there's so much to learn. So that's a little bit about me. And our topic today is, how do I best utilize the IEP and the ISP for transition? So I've been in this world for about 2 years in November. So I'm learning too. A lot of stuff does cross over as far as like for children and for adults, but this transition piece can be really tricky and there is a lot to learn. So I know the first slide says, what's an IEP? And so I know everyone on here knows what an IEP is, but just to have that basic knowledge and just to go over it real fast. So it's an individual education plan. It's developed or formulated from the evaluation team report, the ETR. So before an IEP is able to happen, the ETR has to be completed. And then the ETR will have assessments, and you can say as the parent, I want the OT to look at my child. I want the speech therapist to, do an assessment. I want the psychologist. I want the behavior therapist. That's really important to know because, and it may have changed, but my experience has been like in the past that sometimes the school chooses who does these assessments. And so you might not get an OT assessment. You might not, usually you do get speech therapy assessments, but I just think it's really important to know that you have the right to pick who you want to assess your child in that ETR. It's so important because the ETR lasts for 3 years. We work off the ETR when we write an IEP. So for 3 years, we're referencing that ETR to write goals. And so that's really important. So the IEP is yearly, the ETR is 3 years. The IEP is driven from the ETR. Let's see. So when the child turns 14, the state of Ohio is saying that it needs to be a transition plan from childhood to, the adult world. So from school to adult world, rather. So when a child turns 14, their IEP must have goals that focus on transitioning from school into adult life. A child with a disability can stay in school after they graduate until the age of 22. So they can defer their diploma and continue in the school setting, working on goals that will help them live the life they want. And then once they leave the school setting, this IEP may have goals that focus on pre-employment. Oh, never mind. The IEP, transition IEP, may have goals that focus on pre-employment, employment, or life skills. So it's really important. And it's also important to know that you may need to invite us. So, but I think the schools up in Butler County are doing a really good job once a child turns 14, where they do tend to invite the transition SSAs. Prior to that, we don't get invited too often on IEP meetings for children in, like more school age and not transition age. So before 14. But that is your right to ask for us to be invited. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we can go to the next one. So what is the purpose of a transition IEP? To identify the next steps after a child exits school. So this may be at 18, like I said, or it could be anytime on or before their 22nd birthday. That's a really hard deadline. Like on their 22nd birthday, they can go to school and the next day they're done, like they're out of school. So sometimes parents are really shocked by that because they're thinking, well, it's February 22nd and we only have a few months left. Can't they just stay in school? And no, the state of Ohio is saying on or before their 22nd birthday, they need to exit school. And then the transition IEP identifies needed supports to be successful for life after school and or employment. The transition IEP is creating outcomes and goals to work on skills so that the person can reach their goals and be as independent as possible. What I want to say about that is you really do want the SSAs to be involved because we're the ones in the room at the end of the day. Like we stay with the people we serve a lifetime. And I learned so much in these transition IEP meetings. I learned so much from OOD. I learned so much from the teachers. So as an SSA, I really appreciate being invited to these meetings, and I would encourage you to invite us. Okay. So who makes up the transition team? Definitely the person served should be, sorry, I turned that off, I thought, but I must have turned it on. The person served, and then the intervention specialist, the guardian or parent, opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities, which Sarah will talk about more, DD, Butler County Developmental Disabilities, OTs, therapist, speech therapist, physical therapist. You can have a behavior specialist, and you can invite whoever you want. So that team can be made up of others as well. As a parent, you have that right to invite others to the and have them be on that transition team. There may be more that I'm not thinking of. So Patty, jump in, because nothing like a parent that's been through this to be like, well, I had this person, you know, invited or part of the team, and it was helpful. So we can go to the next slide. So challenges when creating an IEP. The biggest challenge I see parents struggling with is who is who and who does what. And it is really confusing because we're using a lot of acronyms where we talk in a different language. My job might seem like it's very similar to Sarah's as an OOD, not really, but I might have like knowledge where I can be talking more about like that employment piece and stuff. So it gets really confusing. I've noticed I've sent emails where Sarah and I are on the same email, and maybe they're just confused on who I am when I'm from the county, and then Sarah's the OOD person. So I have noticed that it is really confusing to parents, who we are and what we do.
And
So
for the parents, if I can jump in there real quick,
yeah,
Mary, if
yeah,
they when you're in an IEP meeting or any meeting, as soon as they start with DD or OOD or these acronyms, and
yes,
if you're not familiar with them, just stop the meeting and just say, can you please explain what they are? Just because it's better for you to stay on top of it than to get lost. Because I know when I was in an IEP and an acronym would come out like, say, OOD, or they talk about DD and stuff like that, I'd be thinking about that acronym, trying to figure out while they're going on, and then I kind of missed half the information. So just stop them and clarify it before they go on.
absolutely. And I think we try to be real clear on our roles, but like you're taking so much in, and yeah, there's so many people at the table, it can be really intimidating. So I don't mind at all if someone says, I have no idea what you do, what's an SSA, who's DD, who's OOD. Like, I understand that, and I appreciate those questions. So opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities, OOD, they become a really important part of the transition team when it has been identified that the future goal is to have some type of employment. And Sarah is talking next, so she'll talk more about that. And then Butler County Board of DD. We are a part of the transition team for all the goals in the future. This may be work, vocational habilitation, or adult day services, and more. So I think we partner really well with OOD during this time, because we're listening really close, because eventually OOD will phase out, and DD, Butler County DD, your SSA, will be aware and need to advocate for you to get, whatever that may be, so that your child can have that future that they are dreaming of and want to have. Also, the intervention specialist, the teacher, they create the IEP with the help of the person served and their parents and guardians. And I think they do a lot of assessments, like at 14, just to see what the person served is thinking about for their future. And then I just put in here, and I'm so glad to hear you're going to talk about Project Life and Search in a couple weeks. Butler Tech, those programs can be offered. You have to interview for those and be accepted. Then schools themselves have their own programs. So a lot of times they're called like year 23. Like I don't know if that's what Hamilton High School still calls theirs, but I think Talawanda also has a year 23. So that's just focusing on those employment skills and employment within the school, where Butler Tech is like outside of the school. Okay. So what is an ISP? And so an ISP is an individual service plan, and it's put together by Butler County Board of Developmental Disabilities. And you may hear it now referred to as the Ohio ISP, which is supposed to make things a lot easier for parents if they move from county to county, or providers who are providing services like in Butler County. All our plans are going to look the same now. So if you go to Hamilton County, there'll be an Ohio ISP with the exact same questions and information gathered as Butler County. So it's really nice. It's they've worked hard on this. The state did, and you can see there must have been a question. They worked really hard on this, and so now we are using the Ohio ISP. So so just to tell you a little bit about like Butler County Board DD, and I know you were saying that, Patty, that your son had an ISP after he graduated. So there's different, and this gets really confusing too. So if your child gets our services, and they're under 14, they're probably on a caseload. It's called information and referral. And really, no one reaches out to you. You more or less reach out to them if you need help or assistance with utilizing our family support service money and things like that. If that child and family need more support, then they would have a SSA, support service administrator, which is what I am. And they would be working more with the family. And that's when they would have an actual paperwork pamphlet packet called the Ohio ISP. So, we do have like, adults that don't really use our services that much, maybe don't have any funding, and they are on that information and referral caseload. So not everyone has an ISP, but when you get one, that's what it is. It's just a plan that kind of drives where you want the future to be and for the person served and what services they may need. So a person can be on, let's see, this is where the parent will reach out. Okay, I talked about that. So a person has an active plan if they have an SSA, and the paperwork is completed once a year, and the SSA tries to reach out to the person every month to monitor the needs and or services. So there can be funding attached to this, or there can be pretty much no funding, but we're just helping like research and provide you information or help you with anything that is difficult or anything that you want more information on. And just to explain, follow along for when you do need more intense services, we're there and know your child and the person that we served. So we also need to meet face to face now when someone has an Ohio ISP. And we are to do that every 3 months. So it is a little bit more involvement. Some parents feel like it's kind of, it's too much. So they would prefer just to be on that information and referral caseload. But again, like if you do have an SSA, you'll probably, we'll try to reach out once a month, and we'll want to see the person served at least once every 3 months. And I want to make it clear right here, let's see, that the ISO, even though I'm sitting in an IEP meeting as an SSA for Butler County Board of DD, I don't really have any say. I have no say at all on what the school does, but I can guide like the questions and I can support the parent. But I don't have any authority at all. Same with the school. If they're sitting on an ISP meeting, which is the board, the SSA, we made that ISP. They don't really have much, like clout, just like I don't have clout in their arena. So they are two very separate things. And I think we do a really good job in Butler County of supporting each other. Schools are very supportive. We're supportive. So I think we all kind of know each other. So I think it's a really, supportive environment in general anyway. But I just wanted you to know, like those two things, those two are very separate. So I can't go to like an IEP meeting and demand that, whatever it is, that he gets OT services. But I can encourage like mom to say, I could say, did you want to talk to them about, possibly having an OT look at your child? Like I can remind the parent that if we've had that conversation, but I wouldn't be going in there and saying he needs to have OT and you need to do it, because I don't have any clout. So I just wanted to make that, known. So, let's see. I think I talked about everything on this slide. Yep. The Ohio ISP is very involved. I think it's like 30 pages long. So that's very different. We're all learning it because we can interpret it as a county. We interpret like what the state wants to see in those. And so right now we're gathering lots of information about the person that we serve. I think, yeah. So creating an effective IEP and ISP plan, I feel like communication is the number one thing with the SSA, with the parent, with the person served, and with the school, with OOD. I can't, it is number one in my book, is just the communication. And then bringing the person served into all meetings, if possible. I know that's not always possible, but the more we can get input from the person served and just be with them, establish that relationship, even if, they can't sit, that's okay. But at least we get to know them and they kind of get to know our faces and who we are. And then identifying the person's goals. So really hearing from them what they want. And then, getting input from the people that know them the best and in hearing, just what that may be that they would want, planning on how to get there. So I'm constantly, as an SSA, and I'm sure Sarah's the same way, taking in information and figuring out how we're going to get to where we need to go for that individual that we serve. And what needs to happen and what services or funding can help. So we're constantly thinking about those things. And then meeting often as a team, organizing these meetings in advance so that as many people on the team can attend. So not my strong point, but I'm trying to like set up the next meeting during the meeting that we're having, because I find that so important, because our calendars fill up really fast. And if we don't plan that meeting about a month out, it could be that half the team isn't even there. So I just think it's really helpful to do that, and so important to have as many people on the team coming to the meetings. And then I would encourage you to research and talk to other parents and professionals. And that's so important. Like, this is just a very basic, presentation on my part. And I understand that I'm always researching. Things are always changing. New things are coming up, new services. It's a constant learning experience. So I would encourage parents to always just keep researching, keep asking your questions. No questions are not important, if you ask me. I love when parents ask me questions and I can share with them what I know, or I can go to other SSAs. That's another thing. Like, there's 52 of us in Butler County, maybe even more. So we have a wealth of information. And even in the transition team, I have my strengths. We have about 10 SSAs on the transition team. And when we come together, we all have different strengths and knowledge. And it's just really neat to see that, to learn from each other. If I don't know something, I can ask them. I can ask the other SSAs and, that serve adults. So there's many, many people that I can reach out to and get more information for the parent and the person served. Is there any questions? I think there was some chats going on.
I think I got you covered with the chat, Mary.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then we have Sarah Carmella from OD.
I'll go ahead and pull yours up, Sarah, while you introduce yourself and everything, okay?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Patty. Thanks, Mary. So I am Sarah Carmella, and I am what's called a vocational rehabilitation counselor with opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. It's definitely a mouthful. Essentially what that means is my focus is all things employment related. So where Mary and Butler County DD services focus on all kinds of services and are there for life, OOD focuses strictly on employment. So we can come in and out of your lives as many times as you need us to. Just our focus is mainly on employment. So it looks like Patty's got the slideshow set up. So Patty, next slide, please. So like I said, purpose of rehabilitation counseling is all things employment related. So that starts as early as age 14 with school services. So we do collaborate with the schools and with DD and the rest of the IEP. We can help students transition into adult services and finding that long-term employment after graduation. Next slide, please. So I won't go into too much detail because I know a lot like this presentation is mainly on collaboration with the IEP meeting and the IEP team. But a lot of the services that we have on this page can factor into your student's IEP meeting. So OOD offers services starting at age 14, which is when the IEP kind of transitions a little bit from strictly educational related goals to transition planning. So starting at age 14, your student should start having a section in their IEP talking about their goals for after school. So whether that's independent living or employment or going to college or a trade school or however that's going to look when they exit school services, you should start to see some sort of language or goal related to that. OOD offers what we call our pre-employment transition services, or PREETs for short. These are services that are geared for high school students. The nice part about them is they can be offered during the school day. So the provider or the person that's going to be providing these PREET services can coordinate with your son or daughter's intervention specialist to schedule those during the day. The nice part about that is you don't have to worry about another after school appointment to keep track of. And the intervention specialist is also there. They can observe, they can gather information to include on the IEP to go along with those employment goals. Another service we offer is our summer youth work experience. And this is a lot of times when we see a lot of referrals or when OOD is brought to the table. So we offer a short-term, part-time paid work experience that students are able to participate in. It's a group of 4 students to 1 job coach, and we have locations all over the county. And yes, the nice part is your student will get paid at the end of the experience. Additionally, the counselor will try and meet with the IEP team after school starts up again to share that information. So you get a lot of valuable outside information on your student as to how they behaved, how they interacted, how they followed instruction, how did they handle with transitions, getting, out of the car, and started into work. How do they handle these transitions, or problem solving skills? So it's a lot of great information that can be incorporated into your child's IEP. So kind of like Mary said, where you are allowed to invite whomever you want to your child's IEP, I highly encourage you to invite your OOD counselor if you have one to the meetings, because once again, like Mary, we can't dictate or tell the school what they can or cannot do, but we can also provide valuable information, and we get a lot of valuable information as well as to how the student is doing, which helps us make recommendations and help you with transition planning moving forward. The other 2 services on here are job development and on-the-job supports. So these are kind of the end game. Once your student is getting ready to exit school services and they are ready to look for a job, using all this information that we have gotten from an IEP meeting and subsequent meetings or their summer youth work experience, we can talk about job development services, which is where we're looking at where do we want to apply for a job, prepping your student for interviews, talk about how they're going to get to and from work. And then once they do get a job, we do offer on the job supports or job coaching. So this is where someone can go to work with your student, and just like supports they get through work study at school, they're going to have someone there to help them figure out what it is they need to do, where to go if they need to restock something, who to ask for help, developing those natural supports. So just that extra support that I think a lot of us could use, especially when we get that first job. Next slide, please, Patty. OOD does offer some additional services, including driver's training, assistance with post-secondary opportunities. So if you have a student that's interested in getting their CDL or attending college, that's definitely something you can talk with your counselor to figure out a plan. All of those are very individualized based on your student and their needs and their goals. We also offer rehabilitation technology. So if your student has a visual impairment or a hearing impairment or needs some assistance, even with like ergonomics, like if they have back issues, like getting a chair so they can properly sit at a desk and not have back issues, that's something that we can definitely help with and help get them set up. So once again, they're set up for success. A newer service we have added is our bridge support services. So we don't want a lack of income to be a barrier for someone with employment. So if your family or your student is struggling financially or is lacking resources when it comes to obtaining interview clothing or uniform clothing, or is needing help getting resources such as applying for Medicaid or childcare services or looking for housing services within the community, OOD is now working with community resources to help bridge those gaps. So we've developed our bridge support services. Next slide, please, Patty. The pre-employment transition services, these are the specific classes that we offer. So self-advocacy is huge. I know that's something that I would have benefited from as a high school student. We also offer workplace readiness training, job exploration counseling, work-based learning, and then counseling on post-secondary options. So not only do our classes cover important workplace behaviors, what kind of jobs are there out there, or what kind of jobs could I be interested in, as well as if your student is looking at post-secondary options, where would they apply? How would they get connected with the Office of Disability Services on a college campus? That's a big one, because the biggest difference between high school and college is in high school, you are going to have teachers or advocates or counselors say, hey, so-and-so, I noticed you're struggling. Let's contact your parents and let's have a meeting and get you set up for success, or get some, now I'm blanking on the words, Mary, help me, I can't think of the word. I've lost it. Don't you love it when that happens when you're in the middle of talking to everybody? If you need some modifications or thanks, just some extra assistance. High school, they will reach out to you to do that. College, they will not. It's all on your student to get those services set up. Accommodations. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. So if you
and supports. The only word I could think of was supports.
You know, I was like, this isn't the right word. So if you need accommodations, once you're in college, you have to contact your college's Office of Disability Services. They all call it something different, but it's very similar to that. And request those services. And then you have to make sure that your professors are utilizing those accommodations. So I just recently finished up a master's program to get my master's in rehabilitation counseling. And pretty much the professors have a blurb on their syllabus every year that says, if you require any sort of accommodations, you need to let me know by such and such date. Otherwise, sorry about your luck. So working on self-advocacy and figuring out how to navigate that through college is a great resource for your student if that's the route they want to take. Next slide, Patty. Like I said earlier, we have our summer youth work experience. It is paid, so that's a big incentive for students. Typically, they last 3 to 5 weeks and are part-time, so anywhere between 12 and 20 hours per week. Like I said, there are 4 students with 1 job coach. So this is very valuable because it's a short-term, safe place for your student to gain work experience, make those mistakes, and learn some valuable skills. Additionally, if your student is interested in applying for Project Life or Project Search, one of the parts in the application is, do they have any work experience within the community? And this counts. And a lot of times they will follow up with OOD counselors, because we are a part of that team that works with Life and Search students to say, hey, did they participate in a summer youth work experience? How did they do? What do they need to work on? So another great experience that we can offer. Next slide, please. Job development can look different for every student. So, just like a lot of us during high school and college, if we, went that route, we sought part-time employment to get our first job. May not have been the most exciting thing in the world, but we wanted that opportunity to learn and figure out what we like and what we don't like and earn some spending money. Same goes for your transition students too. So we can do what's called non-permanent job development, which is exactly that, looking for that part-time outside of school work to help them gain some employment experience and figure out, do I like working fast food? Do I like cleaning? Do I like stocking? Maybe, maybe not, but do you know for sure until you get that experience? Helps them build a resume. Your job developer will assist your student with applying, interviewing, that follow-up after an interview. So just a lot of experience and assistance to help make looking for a job a lot less overwhelming for your student. Next slide, please. On the job supports or job coaching is just that, helping your student learn their job tasks and figure out who they go to for help, where do they go to refill supplies, developing those natural supports that we all rely on in the workplace. On the job supports can look different for every student. So we have some folks that need a lot of help starting with orientation and filling out those paperwork. Like I remember I'd always have to call my parents. What's an I-9? How do I fill that out? What numbers go where? A job coach can assist them with that. Additionally, we have some folks that are really independent and they don't want the extra attention, or they get a little self-conscious about having that extra spotlight on them. So we can also offer offsite coaching, which is where a job coach will check in with the student outside of work, kind of help them decompress, talk about what went well, what didn't go well. If they have questions, they can ask and kind of go back and follow up and figure out what to do next. Next slide, please. Okay, so yes, you did hear me correctly earlier when I said that OOD can assist your student with driver's training. The biggest thing about driver's training is that's not the only thing we are here for. So your student has to be engaged in what we consider one of our core services. So an employment related service such as those pre-EX services, job development, something like that that's employment related. Driving is important for employment. We understand that, and that independence for being able to get to and from employment is huge. So we can work with you and your student to determine if driving is even appropriate. So there are providers that do a driving assessment that help give a lot of valuable information to the team to help you and your student make that decision if driving is appropriate at this time. Pre-driver's ed is helping them study for the temps test, and then we also offer on-the-road driver's training. And this is huge because it takes a lot of that stress off of you as a parent and allows your student to work with a professional who is used to working with teenagers with disabilities. They have those modified vehicles and it can help with them, with their training. Modified or non-modified, if your student is utilizing a chair or would need any sort of like hand controls, that's definitely something we can work with you and figure out what would be the best avenue. Next slide, please. Post-secondary options, you might have heard a lot of it on the news. Ohio has received a lot of funding for students with disabilities to use towards post-secondary education. So that can include tuition assistance buying books. Additionally, OOD has counselors embedded at lots of colleges and universities across the state. including Miami University. So if you have a student that is interested in pursuing post-secondary opportunities and they want to go to Miami, they'll get to work with our wonderful Wendy Taylor, who is the counselor that's the point of contact for students at Miami. We also have counselors assigned to Cincinnati State, Sinclair, lots of other Wright State, lots of other colleges and universities in the area. So you've got someone with a wealth of information as well as contacts in that disability services office. Next. Bridge supports, I kind of already went over. I think the one thing I forgot was ID replacement. So if your student has lost their state ID and needs help, that's something else the bridge support services can help with. Next slide. Rehabilitation technology is an amazing thing. There's so much that you can do. I can't even begin to describe all of it. But it can include modified vehicles. Like I said, if your student is someone who's going to need hearing controls or a lift in the car, definitely talk to your counselor about those options and what that process looks like. This can include job site modifications. Like I said, rehab tech can be something as simple as getting a chair that's going to make them comfortable. So we can do we can work with providers to get an evaluation to get your students set up with technology in place that's going to make them successful in the work environment. Next slide, please. So how does this work with school? The biggest thing is invite your counselor to IEP, ETR, and transition meetings. Like I said, counselors can share job reports. So if your student has that part-time job, we can talk about those job coaching reports with the team and see, is this what the teacher is seeing, or what, compare notes and how things are going. Keeping the whole team in the loop assists with communication and future planning. So I can't stress it enough. Communication is key, just like Mary said. Next slide. Does anybody have any questions for me? I think I saw a couple of things pop up in the chat. Is it possible for a person to have self-employment as well as go to like a day program? Self-employment is something that your counselor can talk with you about. Like I said, we work for the state, so we have a process and a policy for everything. So your counselor can definitely go over with you and your student the policies and procedures for doing a self-employment business plan and what that looks like. And then together you guys can make a decision or a determination as to if that's the best route to take. Does OOD get involved with job coaches or help with training to use transportation when a person is still in high school? Yes, so you can utilize those services while your student is in high school. We definitely collaborate with Butler County RTA. I know they offer travel training. That's a service that they do. So I know transportation it's difficult no matter where you are or how things go. So OOD can provide some very limited transportation when someone first starts a job. I collaborate with Mary a lot on transportation. So we try to work with OOD to get ongoing transportation set up. And we look at different options, whether it's UTS, Butler County RTA, just whatever we can do to get your student to and from work.
I wanted to ask you, Sarah, while you're you had mentioned about jobs and part-time jobs, and I know this will be coming up later in the year and stuff like that, but I wanted to, a job can earn credits towards Social Security, is that correct?
Yes, there is the ticket to work. So if your student does receive Social Security benefits and they open a case with OOD, you will get a letter in the mail saying OOD is holding on to your student's ticket to work. Social Security is a big confusing beast, and I know that. So I don't even begin to pretend that I'm an expert. We fall under the same umbrella as the Ohio's disability determination. office. So Social Security and OOD do work together. We have the same director that we report to. So there is some information sharing as far as how that can impact your students' benefits. We can work together to do work incentives planning or a benefits analysis to help you as a family understand how working can impact their benefits as well.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead and type them in the chat box. I just had a few things that when I was listening to the presentation, I just wanted to make from my own experience, because my son's been through several of these steps. But I wanted to, and credits was one of them. The other thing was where we found jobs. The first job they start at is not the job they'll probably change a couple times. Don't expect that the one job they get and get coached through is the one they're going to stay at for life. So, you know, expect some changes, and OOD is there and the county board is there to help you with that part too. Like if they aren't satisfied with their job, that kind of thing. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, we aren't a one and done agency. So just like I said, we're just here when you need us and we're not when we don't. So closing your child's case shouldn't be a scary proposition. So ideally it's to make things easier for you. I know as a parent, you're trying to keep track of so many things and so many different organizations. So we don't keep you open and call you up all the time saying, hey, how's so-and-so's job going? How's so-and-so's job going? Just talk to me about so-and-so's job. We're not going to do that. So we will take that step back and close the case, but it doesn't mean we're gone forever. It just means your student doesn't need us right now. So if they are ready to look for a different job or even go for a promotion, they can reach out to us and reapply, and we will gladly help them again. Real quick, I also wanted to, OOD has a new main point of contact for our transition referrals. And Lauren, if you're still here, if you can turn your camera on and say hi real quick. Lauren Conan is one of our new transition counselors in the county. So I wanted to be sure to introduce her so you guys have a name and a face to put together.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just in reference to the job coach, I just wanted to also, when my son first started taking a job, some of the jobs require these training modules. And I don't know, you know, Sarah and Mary, if you're, you know, can relate to this, but there was like 50 training modules for one of his jobs he had to go through. And we had a job coach sit with him. They couldn't answer the question, but they could help him read through it because there was a lot of reading. And they had to do a few each day. It wasn't like something you sat down and did all in one day. It was a week. So I just wanted to, you know, the job coach was very handy and helpful, like in those situations. If we didn't have the job coach, that would mean, you know, my husband or me, I mean, you'd have to sit through them to get through those training modules. It was a lot of work. And they helped him understand some of the questions as well, because some of the questions, I mean, not every child is the same, but you know, just those word problems or reading something maybe it's just hard for them to understand what is being actually asked. I have trouble with word problems, so I understood totally.
And then I just put our website in the chat. You can go here to get started, to refer yourself or your child for services. We accept applications for students starting at age 14 and on up.
And the other, Sarah mentioned the driver's training. The other thing I want to make sure parents are aware of is, OOD helped with this driver's training. We did get the assessment done and he went and got his temps. Now, this was more of a 2-year process. It's not like 3 months you're done. Maybe some children or some of the individuals or students are a little quicker, but it was like we had to renew his driver temps. He did hours and hours of driving. He did have the assessment, but even after he got his driver's license, we went with him everywhere for like 2 years just to make sure he could get some places. And then his radius was it grew. At first it was a 2-mile radius that he'd drive himself to, and it was back roads like to the grocery store or something. And then later, you know, work was like 8 miles away. And so we eventually worked our way out until he was comfortable with the roads. But it was like a 2-year process till we were all said and done for the driver. part. Even though he got his driver's license, we still continued with, you know, monitoring him as well. But the assessments and OOD were a big help in that step because it was a difficult step for us. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to make mention too was like I had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, for those who weren't here, in the upcoming sessions, we will be talking about post-secondary. We have Wright State coming to speak on the 26th about those accommodations and about what does it look like on campus life. You know, and Sarah touched on that in her presentation as well. Just the connections that you have are very, very important, and how you prepare in the IEP, and then later in the ISP, you know, are very much the foundation for these preparations. And so it's so important to understand some of these. And then driver's license and transportation, we're talking about that in October during Assault series. I see there's a couple of questions coming through. If you have anything else to add, feel free to jump in. Looks like you answered, got those. The sessions will be, I'm going to be stopping the recording here shortly, but we have recorded the sessions. I see there's someone was wondering if this will be posted somewhere for those who could not attend. Yes. So we record all the sessions. I put it on, we have a YouTube library for SALT. We also have a live binder library. They're online resources from last year, from previous presentations. Certain presentations we will remove that are older and then replace them with newer. So there will be those links that were posted will take you to each one of those resource links. Okay, there's a question. What's the best way to get services and supports for your child when you don't know what to ask?
Are we talking like from the county or from OOD or maybe from both?
Both, you know, so my son is 18, and every time I try to go to these SALT things, which are great, I just feel like the more I know, the less I know. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So I don't know where to go from here, you know, because it seems like one question can go to 3 different side questions to go to, and then at that point I forgot what the original question was. So help.
I was just gonna say, if does he have an SSA? Because you can start there, and we can, you know, figure out what's going on and what services he actually has at school, if he's at school, and if OOD's open. Like, we can start that process and kind of like filter out and figure out, oh, after we reach out to different agencies, this is what we actually have for this child, and this is maybe what he's needing. So if you want to start with Butler County DD, that might be a good place. But Sarah, what were you going to say?
I would say, Tony, if your son is interested at all in employment, you can definitely get him signed up for OOD services, and we can answer a lot of questions in that first initial meeting that we have together. I always tell folks, I know for my kids, I think of my best questions either on my way home after that appointment or in the middle of the night if I wake up. So
Right.
I always tell parents, my work phone is on when I'm at work and it's off when I'm not. So as you think of questions, either write them down so you have a list, or you know, text or leave a voicemail for your counselor. We'll get back to you as soon as we can on the next business day to answer all your questions. We know and understand that this is a very stressful time for both you and your students, so we're happy to answer any and all of your questions.
Okay, that's a great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I can understand like what Tony's asking too, because so many parents are like, I know there's a question out there to ask. I just don't know what it is, and I'm not sure exactly where to turn next. And if I've crossed all my T's and dotted my I's up to this point. So if there's a situation or a concern, whether it be at work, school, whatever stage your child's at, just run it by the SSA and say, hey, is this something that I need to ask for help for? Is there assistance for this? So like maybe your son or daughter is having trouble at work, maybe communicating with a fellow student, a teacher, or a fellow employee or supervisor, maybe something, something there is a little confusing for them and you're not exactly sure what's going on, that is something that you can just start asking these counselors. Hey, this is a situation, what do I do? Maybe start like that too.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome, Tony. Are there any other questions that anybody has or anybody's thinking of for these? I know when I was a latecomer to the whole process. I know the IEPs were always overwhelming for me. I didn't know we could invite people. I would have if I had known. I didn't realize that. I tried to invite some family members, but they were either working or something, but they didn't understand all the processes. So having, someone from the county board, someone from OOD can start stepping in around 14. Once you go through some of the eligibility processes, just to meet with them. They have at schools, and there's certain schools that there's parent mentors out there that can also guide you a little bit. And it would be school specific. You'd have to just ask. I don't know, Mary or Sarah, if you can elaborate on any of those supports too.
I can get more information on the schools that have that and who the contact is. I don't have it right with me right now, but if someone wants to email me, I can, that's a good point. Yes, some schools do have parent advocates.
And yes, I just saw Dawn's on here. She's a parent mentor at
There you go.
yeah, Centerville and Oakwood, which is up in Montgomery County, correct, Dawn?
Yes, yes. Since the Cincinnati area has quite a few, I know there's one at Middletown, Lakota, Cincinnati Public, Hamilton. There's several in Hamilton County. So yeah, in Montgomery County, there's me and Ketterings.
There's a website for people to look up, right? Can you put that in the chat box, the website for the parent mentors?
Yes.
And then Sarah, I think you put the OOD website link in there, correct?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions for our speakers today? Or anything that maybe we talked about that was confusing? If you think of it, like I usually think of it after the fact, just email me. I can put you in contact with either one of these that have presented today, or I can direct your question to whoever would be associated with your county, or, if you're a different county for a county board, we can, get you hooked up. If there are no more questions, I'm going to close the recording, and you can ask. We can ask freely, or can have a discussion before we end it at 1 second. And thank you all those who are on for attending today. And don't forget, when we log out, there is a survey about caregivers and self-care, if you can answer that. 1 second.